You're listening to the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. So, Jehan, let's move on and discuss the Australian summer for 2024-25 and have a bit of a preview to the summer as well, because it's going to be a big summer. India coming out for 5 test matches, Pakistan for 3 ODIs and 3 T20s as well. And obviously a big summer indeed, as it always is, whenever you have multiple countries coming out. So Australia and Pakistan, ODI and T20 series. They're going to play the ODIs in Melbourne, Adelaide and Perth, and then the T20s in Brisbane, Sydney and Hobart. And that will be before the test series against India. So that will be at the start of November until the 18th for those ODIs and T20s. And then we get into the test series against Australia and India, which will be 5 test matches in Perth, Adelaide, Brisbane, Melbourne and Sydney. And that's going to round out the summer. So Jehan, first of all, let's have a bit of a talk about the Australia and Pakistan ODI T20 series and talk about that. So that's going to start the summer off. And these series, as I mentioned, will take place before the test matches against India. So Australia will definitely try some new players and definitely have their B or C team in those series because of the test series with India following straight after. With an eye to the future, as we've already discussed. So, Jehan, how do you see Australia performing in the ODIs and T20 series against Pakistan? Because Pakistan of late haven't been performing well across all 3 formats, especially in ODIs and T20s over the last year or so. They had a pretty poor T20 World Cup this year. They had a poor 50-over World Cup last year. So, you know, it's pretty obvious, Jehan, that Australia should win both series. But how do you see Australia going in the ODIs and T20s against Pakistan?
So should win both series 3-0 probably. Look, T20s can go either way a lot of the time, but I would expect them to win the one days 3-0. With the test series coming up, it's a good opportunity to have a look at younger bowlers. I still think they should be playing their number 1 batting lineup, because I think they still need to try their best to win every game and win the series, because it's all good preparation going forward for those tournaments coming up. And again, the T20s is another good opportunity to have a look at the best of the Big Bash. The players playing in the Big Bash that are up and coming, and see what they can do in an Australia shirt. I think with the one-day team, I just want Australia to, excuse me, to just try and go back to creating that legacy that they had from, let's say, just after they won the World Cup in '99 up until 2015, and just try and remain dominant in that format of the game. And T20, it's just a good opportunity to have a look at younger players in the pressure of an international game and in front of, crowds and television audiences. I think, it's Pakistan, so I think it should be a fairly straightforward win for Australia.
Yeah, it should, given Pakistan's sort of decline of late, really, in ODIs and T20s and even test matches as well. They're not doing too well. Yeah, I agree. Probably a straightforward series win for Australia in both formats, given how Pakistan are playing of late. So that's pretty straightforward. But as you said, T20 series could go either way. But the ODIs, you would think Australia should win, even without their main players. And, they do pretty well without them anyway, given Australia's depth and strength is pretty good. So, that it's pretty straightforward. for Australia and Pakistan. The big one, which is pretty much the centerpiece of the summer, is Australia and India. 5 test matches, the first time since 1991-92 that Australia and India would be playing 5 test matches. And India have won the last 2 series in Australia. 2018-19, they won 2-1. And the last series, 2020-21, they won 2-1 as well. But when you look back at the last few series, Jehan, going back to 2014-15, India have won the last 4 test series to Australia's 1. And that was in 2014-15, where Australia won 2-0, and that was in Australia. And then in 2017, Australia toured India, and they lost 2-1 in the best of 4. 2018-19, the home series, India won in Australia. Their first test series win in Australia, 2-1. 2020-2021, India won 2-1, which was here in Australia, the last Australian series. And then obviously last year, Australia touring India, they lost 2-1 again, Australia, in the best of 4. So that's how things have gone over the last few years. So it's 10 years since Australia won the Border Gavaskar Trophy, so they would like to get it back this summer and stop the run of wins for India here in Australian Test Series. But Jehan, India, they could be the second team to win 3 consecutive Test Series in Australia this century. Do you know who the other team is, Jehan? Yes. I thought you knew. South Africa.
I didn't.
They're the only two. Yes. So this century, India can join South Africa as the only 2 teams to win 3 consecutive Test Series in Australia. It just shows you how hard it is to win in Australia, especially in Test Series consecutively. But India could join that list. Can Australia win the series? Can India repeat a Gabba-type victory? Can Australia put the Gabba heartache to bed? Can India make it 3 from 3? These will be the questions people want answers to, and they'll definitely get that once this series is over. So, Jehan, how do you see this Border Gavaskar Trophy series going between Australia and India? Do you think Australia can break the drought and finally win and break the winning streak of India, or do you think it will be a tight series? And do you think India will reign supreme?
No, I think Australia will win 5-0.
I thought you were going to say that.
No, look, it is the marquee series, isn't it? The 2, I would say, best test playing nations in this current era. They're the 2 teams that made the WTC final, and it's just going to be good, solid test cricket. I think there's not going to be any gimmicks like Bazball. The pitches should be pretty standard. They're not going to be extreme conditions like you get in India with the raging Turners. So it should be good, hard fought cricket. I see that 2021 series as just a series full of missed opportunities for Australia, similar to the last 2 away Ashes series, actually. At least those ones they managed to draw, but this is what the India one they lost. Looking back at that series, there was so many moments in that series where they were really quite well on top, and then just managed to let India back into the game and not quite managed to get those wins. I mean, probably the worst example of that was when they should have won in Sydney, and you had 2 guys battling injuries who were able to block out a day and get the draw. I mean, that probably changed the momentum of the series. Then, and also Melbourne, they were doing pretty well, and there was a partnership between Jadeja and I think it was Rahane, maybe.
Yes, he went on to make a century, Rahane, in that innings, in that test. Yeah.
Yeah, so that partnership, probably against the run of play at that time, is what won them that match. And then the Gabba, they just had the perfect opportunity to just put India away. Like, they won the toss, batted first, good wicket. Marnus gets 100. Wade's batting well. Both throw away their wickets towards the end of the day, and then collapse to a middling score. Yeah, and then even, India still had to chase down, what was it, over 300, I think.
I think it was 320 odd, I think, in the end, or something
Yeah.
like that.
So I mean, they should have really won that. I mean, firstly, they should have been chasing up to 400, and then they probably definitely wouldn't have won. And then they just couldn't stop Rishabh Pant. They allowed India's second, third string bowlers to get wickets. I mean, T. Najarajan, like, where's he now?
Natarajan, Saini, Sundar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The all-rounder, what's his name?
Thakur.
Yeah, Thakur, yeah. Yeah, I mean, you shouldn't be losing wickets to these guys. You know what I mean? Like, you have to be a little bit more ruthless than that. So I think that's where they lost that. They lost that series. I think they were just a little bit. I think they were too complacent. And Tim Paine's captaincy probably wasn't the best. Dropped some catches towards the end. I think because he distracted himself by sledging too much, probably. Which is, it's a bit silly when you're bringing that on, making mistakes by bringing it on yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that series was just full of missed opportunities. I thought that the 2018-19 series was more of a dominant win for India, because Australia just weren't at their best in that series. They were missing Warner and Smith. I think the overall morale in the team wasn't too good. I don't know if you can remember, like, Marcus Harris was opening the batting, and he
Aaron Finch as well.
Harris just looked completely out of his depth. You've got a one-day batsman opening as well in Finch. Having said that, they pushed them pretty close in that first test at Adelaide. They only lost by 20 or 30 runs, I think, but just went downhill after that. But I think this time, now, I was thinking this before Cameron Green got injured, but I thought that Australia would have a really good top strength team who are desperate to win this series and finally get the Border Gavaskar Trophy back after 10 years. The bowling attack's been settled for a long time. Cameron Green seems to be finally coming into his own. I would say he's a lot more of a confident player than he was in 2021. He's a different player. Particularly his bowling has improved a lot since then, and his batting has been on the way up as well. Obviously, with the 200s he scored. So yeah, it's a bit of a shame that he's developed this injury, and that's going to cause some selection issues, and they'll need to do some thinking as to what kind of team they go in with, in terms of number of all-rounders. They bring in a more specialist batsman, a specialist opener. So that injury has sort of thrown everything up in the air at the moment, which is not ideal. How far out are we? Maybe about 6 weeks out from day one. So yeah, but I still think it's going to be a great series. It will be a great series, and I think the pitches will be good. I'm hoping that the Optus pitch isn't the one that they have been struggling with in recent tests there, with the uneven bounce, and Because I think if there is that uneven bounce and a bit of sideways movement, I think that brings India more into the game because they've got bowlers that can extract that. Whereas I think if it's the typical fast bouncy sort of whacker type of pitch with no sideways movement, just extra pace and bounce, I think that will suit Australia more. So that's what I'm hoping for there. Australia always play well in the day-night tests. So they've got one coming up in Adelaide. So look, if they're 3-0 up with the Boxing Day and Sydney test to come, it could well become 5-0. So yeah, I mean that's what I'm hoping for. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think going down the Glenn McGrath sort of prediction 5-0, I think everyone would say 5-0. But no, I think it could be a lot closer than that. You want a close series, You don't want to see one-sided contests and that, but deep down inside, you want 5-0. And I know you would, Jehan, and obviously if Glenn McGrath was here, he'd probably say the same thing. He always says 5-0. For every Ashes series, it's always been the same. Australia will win 5-0.
I mean, the interesting thing is, let's say, for example, they get completely dominated in Perth. In India, would they be able to regroup after that? I mean, they did after the collapse in Adelaide in 2020.
Yes, they did.
So that will be interesting to see. But I think over a course of a 5-test series, I think it would be generally harder to scrape a test win. But we'll see. I mean, I just hope Australia don't make as many mistakes as they did in that series 4 years ago.
Yes, I think it will be different because Pat Cummins is now captain, and different to Tim Payne, and so India have different players as well. They're going to have players who haven't played here before, like Jaiswal, for example. He hasn't played here before. So it's going to be an initiation and test for him. But I think it'll be different this time around. I think Australia will win the series because, being from Australia, obviously a bit of a bias there. But no, I think Australia start off as favourites, you would think, given what they've done of late under Pat, and they won the World Test Championship final against India last year. So, different captaincy with Pat. He's done pretty well since he's taken over the role. They're going to be a lot determined and motivated to win.
They're going to be desperate to win this series.
Yeah, they're going to be desperate because they haven't won in 10 years, and the last couple of series,
losing to India.
Yeah, the last couple of series they've lost, especially at home, which will burn Pat inside and obviously the team. So they would like to rectify that, and I think they will. I do see. The question is, do India have that motivation and drive to do it again? Because once you've already done something once that took them 70 odd years to do, which they did in 2018-19, it's very hard to keep coming back and wanting to do that again. They've done it twice now. So they, as I mentioned before, very good knowledge from you, Jehan. A bit of a trivia question I threw in there. Could be the second team behind South Africa to win 3 consecutive series in Australia this century. In Test cricket.
It used to annoy me when South Africa used to keep coming down here and winning. So that's how I remember that.
Well, they had a good team, they had a good team, and it was pretty hard to watch those series. But you got to admit, they were probably the best team going around in those years. And India's sort of in that same boat as well. They've done pretty well for a long time. But you think about it, this series, it could be the last time we see Kohli, Rohit Sharma, Jadeja, Ashwin, Shami play in Australia because they're all a similar age, and same with the Australian team as well, the Smith, Khawajas, Stark, Nathan Lyon. So I think both teams will be determined to make this a good series and send off those players. Did I mention Kohli? I forgot Kohli. Yeah, Virat Kohli as well, similar age. So probably the last time we'll see them in a series in Australia. But it comes down to that motivation. Have they got that drive and motivation? They've also got a new coach as well, and Gautam Gambhir, who's just replaced Rahul Dravid. How will he go about things? With the group and all that stuff. You've got Rohit Sharma, who's captain. He wasn't captain the last time. Did he play in the last series? I think he did. Or did he? I think he did. Yeah, he did.
He did?
Yeah, I think he did.
He opened with Shubman. I remember Shubman Gill opening.
Yeah, Gill was opening. I think Rohit Sharma was in the side. Maybe someone in the comments will probably tell us otherwise. Or maybe we need to look back at the scorecards and that. But he's captain. And it'll be the first time he's going to be captain in Australia. So that's a different set of pressure as well. So there's a lot of challenges for India, but they're a good side. They can, win the series if they wanted to. But they'll know Australia will come hard and be a different Australian side with Pat Cummins' leadership. And you talked about opportunities from the last series, Jehan. I think this time with Pat, I think that, what Tim Payne didn't have and what Pat has is he has that calmness and, cool under pressure. And I think for Australia having that will serve them well and just being able to be calm under pressure. How many times you've seen Pat Cummins flustered? He doesn't look flustered, doesn't he? He looks pretty calm. So it's good to have that calmness in a leader and a captain, and that's why Australia went wrong in the last series because they didn't have that under pressure. When they were put under pressure, they sort of panicked in a way. And with Pat, he doesn't really panic that much. You just play your way, and you try and get back into the game, and try and be patient, and things will turn out okay. So it is going to be a big series, always is, and may the best team win, I say, because it's going to be an entertaining series. It's going to be an interesting series. And, there's good batters on both sides. There's good bowlers. You look at it, I think they're pretty evenly matched. I don't think you can separate the two. They're pretty good, both teams. It'll come down to probably who can score the most runs, I think. Both bowling attacks are capable.
Yeah, I still think Australia's bowling attack is stronger in these conditions. Probably Australia's batting is looking a bit weak at the moment, particularly when you look at the way they played last season, and now with the Cameron Green injury as well. So I think, if anything, I think that's where India can maybe get on top of Australia if they can take some early wickets and really put some pressure on Steve Smith and Travis Head.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously for Australia, Smith and Head are going to be key, with the bat. And for India as well, they're going to have some key batters, Kohli, Rohit Sharma, and Shubman Gill, and Jaiswal, and whatever. Going to be important for them, and also the bowlers as well on both sides. You've got Cummins, Stark, and Hazelwood and Lyon. You've got Bumrah, Shami. He's a bit of a question mark because he's coming back from injury, isn't he? And then you've got Siraj as well, who debuted in the last tour and did okay. So they've got and Ashwin and Jadeja as well, and I don't think they're going to choose another spinner. I don't think in the squad. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know. I don't think they will. I don't think they'll call up Axel Patel. I don't think, because you don't need three spinners in Australia, but as backup probably, just in case an injury happens. But it'd be interesting to see how they go across the Test matches. But they've got that belief. They've already won here before. They know what to do. And Australia know what they're up against. So it's going to be a great series regardless. But, yeah, I think Australia probably win. Probably maybe 3-2 in the end, maybe. I don't know. They tend to play well, India, in Melbourne and Sydney. because similar conditions to the subcontinent, not fast and bouncy. The day-night test in Adelaide is a challenge. They got bowled out for 36 last time. Yeah. In Perth, they'll struggle if it's a lively pitch like it was in 2018-19. And then in Brisbane, they've already won there before, so I don't think they're fazed by that. So I think that could go either way, I think. But definitely Perth, that first test, could be the one where they find it more very difficult and challenging given the conditions. And, all subcontinent teams struggle in Perth anyway. So it was the last win for India in Perth, 2007-8, in that test match that they won at the Wacker.
Yeah.
So,
no, they lost in 2017-18 at Optus.
Yes, in the last series, in that test, 2018-19, yep, and then
18-19.
Yeah, then they lost that test there. So, as I said, interesting series and hopefully a great series and a great spectacle, especially. Two of the biggest sides in world cricket, and it is probably going to be a fantastic series either way. And let's see how it pans out. Always a good series between Australia and India. So let's hope that is the case this summer. Looking forward to it as many people are. So let's see what happens come the series. Jehan, let's discuss and preview the Ashes for next year, 2025-26 in Australia, the Ashes series. Let's touch on that a little bit. It's a long way away still. It's a year out or so. Could be a different type of series this time around in Australia for this Ashes series. With the mention of Bazball, Ben Stokes, Brendan McCullum, could be a different England team that we're used to. The last series win for England was obviously back in 2010-11. It was 3-1 of the best of 5, which England won. And since then, well, it hasn't been great. It hasn't been great for England. 2013-14, they lost 5-0. 2017-18, they lost 4-0. And 2021-22, they lost 4-0 in the last 3 Ashes series since 2010-11. So it just shows you how much they've struggled in those series. And especially the last series was very poor, really, when Joe Root was captain. And, it was a very underwhelming series, even though Australia won. Yeah. But this time around, Australia better equipped to deal with Bazball, unlike in 2023 in England. They've experienced Bazball for what it is, and they'll be ready for the challenge that comes towards them with that. And also, can England get the job done? Can their bowlers be effective? Can their batters stand up and score runs? Those are the questions that England will have to try and answer. So, Jehan, how do you see next year's Ashes series going? Do you think it will follow the similar pattern? Do you think Australia will win? Or do you think England with Bazball will, change it up a bit? At least give some respectability back to England when playing in Australian conditions. So your thoughts on that?
I don't think anything will change, to be honest. I think it will be a big win for Australia. Maybe 4-0, possibly 5-0. If there's no rain in Sydney, maybe 5-0. I don't think Bazball is going to work here in these conditions, especially on the faster, bouncier wickets. Because you're just going to, with that style of play, I think you're just going to be giving Australia too many opportunities to take wickets. And I think you also need to, because the wickets here are pretty good to bat on generally, you have to be able to bat for long periods of time. So it's interesting if you looked at the England-India series in India. I'm not saying the wickets are very similar to here, but they played on basically very flat tracks that took a bit of a turn towards the end. Interestingly, quite different to the tracks Australia played on when they were there, when they were just raging from ball one. But that's another story. But what would happen is England would score 400 at say 5 or 6, 7 runs and over, and then taking like maybe 1 day, and then India would come in and bat and say, okay, we're going to bat for 2 days. We'll score slightly slower, so that we're not taking too many risks. But we because it's such a flat wicket, we can bat for 2 days. So I think that sort of mentality could work here as well, because even the Gabba can get pretty flat on days 2, 3, and 4. So I think, having said that, I think one thing that Australia do need to try and do is increase their scoring rate themselves, not play Bazball, but I think they need to be a little bit more proactive, because they tend to get bogged down at times, and that can really change or shift the momentum of the game to the opposition. And it's fine if you're able to bat for long periods of time without getting out. But then if you're scoring at 2, 2.5 and over, and then suddenly lose 3 wickets, then you're not ahead in the game. And I think that's been an issue for Australia for a while. If you look at that batting lineup, I think the only 2, now that David Warner's retired, the only 2 really that really take the attack to the bowling is Marsh and Head. And they're down the order. So I think the likes of Khawaja, Smith and Labuschagne do need to be a little bit more proactive. And I'm not saying score at 6, 7 runs and over, but maybe push up to 3.5, 4 runs and over, just to put a bit more pressure back on the bowlers and try and get ahead in the game. I mean, Smith used to be quite a free scoring batsman, but even he's getting a bit bogged down more these days. And I don't know if you can remember that innings that Marnus played in the last Ashes, where he scored 9 off 90 balls or something like that.
Yes, it was in the last test, wasn't it, at the Oval, wasn't it? Yes.
Yeah, I mean that kind of innings is just going to lose you the game, really, when you think about it, because you're just wasting time doing that. And not only wasting time,
but form as well, Marnus.
So it just allows the opposition to dictate terms a little bit. But yeah, I don't think Bazball is going to work in Australia. Whenever Australia when they've drawn these last 2 series in England, one of the issues for them has been knocking over the tail. Particularly the last series, a lot of key runs came from the likes of Mark Wood and Wokes and these kind of guys down the order that ended up being a big difference in the outcome of the test matches that they lost, and then obviously the series. But that doesn't tend to work as much in Australia, because I think with the fast bouncy pitches you can bomb out the tail pretty much, which is what Australia are good at doing. So I think, England have tended to, when they tour here, be a bit of a side that are basically 4 down or 5 down and then all out, because their tail just doesn't hang around too much against the bouncers. And Australia tend to do that when they go to England, so they'll bat well up to 4 or 5 down, and then none of their tail can get runs, apart from the odd occasion like at Edgbaston when Lyon and Cummins got those winning runs. So look, I don't think England have much of a chance, really. By the time that series starts, I think Australia will have more of an established batting lineup. May well be Smith's last series. I think it will be the last time that the bowling quartet plays together in the series, if they're all fit. And not sure if Khawaja will still be playing. So the batting lineup might look quite different by that time. But look, I still think it will be at minimum. I think it will be 4-0, but possibly 5-0.
Yeah. Yeah, it could be the same pattern as it has been for the last few series in Australia. But
Oh, and the other
yes,
thing is, I don't think England have the bowling attack to do well here
yes, I
either.
was just going to say, yeah.
I mean,
No
even
Broad, no Anderson,
well, even those
Mark
two,
Wood a bit, or or Jofra Archer as well.
Yeah.
You need that pace, and they really want Wood and Archer to be in the same side. But Mark Wood's had another injury, and Archer's coming back, and they've got Gus Atkinson and that Chris Woakes. Well, his record outside of England's not good. The last series, Mark Wood was their best bowler. He ruffled a few Australian batters up. So missing that experience of Broad and Anderson, the pace, excuse me, Wood and Archer, you need that. Atkinson's only new to Test cricket. You've got an inexperienced spinner in Bashir. It's very hard to bowl finger spin in Australia. Also, Jack Leach as well. The last series, every time he came on, Australia just took him to shreds. Really, it may be a bit different under Ben Stokes because he, tends to keep attacking fields for when the spinners come on and not put anyone back on the rope. But yeah, those are the things that England need to ask themselves as well in terms of those questions. So they are going to have some challenges, and that's been the problem for them for some time. Yeah. And also Ben Stokes, as captain as well, continuing this mantra of baseball, and with him and McCullum at the helm as captain and coach. Maybe their batting may improve slightly with this new mindset that they've developed over the last few years. Can Joe Root score 100 in Australia? That's the one thing on his record that he needs to tick off. He didn't do that in the last series. He came close, but didn't quite do it. And we all know how good of a player he is, but he hasn't quite done it in Australia. So there's a lot of questions for England to ask going into the series, and especially with this new philosophy on baseball. But there were definitely, what we do know, probably no draws, Jehan, I don't think. I don't think if Ben Stokes was in charge in the last series, I don't think they would have been drawing that match in Sydney. But obviously bad light and rain prevented Australia from winning that game. But what we do know, probably no draws, and that as well. So, let's hope we don't see the short ball tactic again. I know we saw that last year and it was a bit monotonous and nothing really happened. Well, things did happen, wickets fell, but I won't be surprised if both teams go to that tactic again for this series. Australia certainly did, and it certainly worked at Lords in that test. They lost a few wickets in a heap, didn't they, England? They kept taking it on. So we may see that ploy again in this series. And definitely Australia will be a bit better to handle baseball, unlike last year. I don't know, maybe, many Australian fans were saying, wait until you do it against our bowlers, but maybe everyone was a little bit naive and, didn't really, obviously, that sort of thing, as you say, in Ashes series, of course, Well, but I suppose really they didn't really quite handle it as well as they would have hoped, because it didn't really quite work out the way that Australia wanted.
Yeah. The other thing I would say is the grounds are obviously bigger as well, so a lot of the top edges won't just fly over the boundary. Yeah, so I don't know. I have this feeling it's just not going to work in Australia, in Australian conditions.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, really. We don't know until you actually play the series. And it was that sort of thing I was saying before about everyone saying that England won't be able to do it against Australia's bowlers. Well, they sort of did, really. And the Australian bowlers struggled a bit, especially in that fourth test in Manchester that were on the back foot dramatically.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I
mean, the thing is, even when they play in England, if England are going to play Glasgow, I don't think they should change their bowling too much. I think continue to try and hit a length, keep a few slips and gullies in, and then if they're using their feet and coming down the wicket, then bounce them, keep them in the crease. I mean, it's not rocket science.
No, it's not. Or resort to T20 or ODI tactics.
Yeah,
in a way. That's
what
you sort
of really getting.
So.
Yeah, if they're getting on top, then that's what you do. But I think you still need to give yourself opportunities to get them out. And I think that's what they were too defensive for my liking in that series.
Well, we saw that a bit in the Test documentary, did we? A bit of an insight on that, and they wanted to restrict boundaries and stuff.
Yeah.
They'll definitely have their plans. I think in this ODI series against England recently, when Harry Brook was on strike, they bowled wide of him outside off stump, and I think that's how he got out in the last test against Sri Lanka at the Oval in that series. I think he said on the stump mics, "Oh, it's a bit of boring cricket here." Well, sometimes you probably have to be boring to get wickets against this England side because you got to test their what's the word? Ego. I think play on their ego a little bit.
Yeah, definitely.
And sort of wear them out a bit and bore them out. You know, play on their ego a bit, and they'll play a big shot and get out and give their wicket away. So Australia will have their plans, and I think Pat will definitely learn a lot from the last series. He's that type of person and character. Always reflects on his performances and what he can do better as captain. So definitely, I think Australia will be better equipped to handle it. And I think going into it, I think they were a bit naive, I think, or like many of us, I think, until you haven't experienced it, then you don't know how you're going to handle it. So I think everyone was a bit guilty of that. And they were under pressure to an extent. And, if we're honest, they probably should have lost the series 3-2.
Yeah.
They should have. They probably got lucky in the first two tests, but they were good enough to win. But they should have obviously lost at Headingley, and they should have lost in Manchester, and they should have lost at the Oval, which they did. Yeah. But obviously it rained in Manchester, and the series was drawn at 2-2. So be interesting to see what happens next year when the Ashes happen and come to town, as we always look forward to the Ashes and seeing the contest between Australia and England. But
look, and the other thing is, in Australia, the conditions are generally even over 5 days, so you don't have to worry about overheads and ball changes and things like that.
No, you don't. Unlike what happened last year. A few controversial things happened, but we'll gloss over that. But hopefully no controversial moments in next year's Ashes. I think I don't really want to talk about controversial moments. I think, well, that's just how it happens in Ashes cricket. Of course, you're going to have some controversial moments that happen from time to time. It wouldn't be the Ashes, wouldn't it, without something controversial? So definitely adds a bit of spice to the rivalry. So that's a bit of a preview for next year's Ashes series, and hopefully it will be a very exciting series. Let's hope that's the case next year. Hi everyone, I hope you enjoyed part 3 of our cricket discussion with Jehan on Australian cricket. I hope you enjoyed hearing Jehan and I discuss the Australian Summer 2024-25 preview and the Ashes preview for 2025-26. Stay tuned for part 4 of our cricket discussion with Jehan on Australian cricket.